In the heart of Manhattan, where skyscrapers pierced the December sky, James Carter stood alone in his penthouse, gazing at the city's twinkling lights. At 38, the white American tech mogul had built an empire from his innovative startups. His sharp blue eyes and neatly trimmed blonde hair, gracing the covers of Forbes and Wired. Yet as Christmas loomed, the glow of his success felt hollow. The vast windows of his 40th floor apartment framed a city alive with holiday cheer families, bustling through Central Park street vendors, selling roasted chestnuts. But inside, the silence was deafening. James's wealth couldn't fill the void of another Christmas spent alone, dodging the pitying glances of his distant family during their annual video call. He spun his phone between his fingers, a nervous habit that betrayed the confident persona he wore in public. The idea had struck him weeks ago, born of desperation and a touch of shame. Hire someone to pose as his holiday companion, someone to convince his domineering Aunt Margaret and her clan that he wasn't the lonely bachelor they whispered about. His inheritance, tied to the family trust, depended on maintaining a flawless image, and Margaret's scrutiny grew sharper each year. James scrolled through his contacts, pausing at a name, Lila Harris, a 29-year-old Black American waitress he'd met at a cozy downtown diner. Her warm brown eyes and quick smile had lingered in his mind, a contrast to the cold efficiency of his world. She'd served him coffee late one night, sharing a fleeting story of her mother's struggles that struck a chord. Now he typed a message offering her $10,000 to spend Christmas Eve at his penthouse, posing as a close friend. He hit send, heart pounding, wondering if he'd just made a fool of himself. Miles away in a cramped Harlem apartment, Lila Harris sat on her worn couch staring at the text. At 29, her rich brown skin glowed under the dim light of a single lamp, but exhaustion lined her face. She'd spent the day balancing trays at the diner, her feet aching, her mind heavy with worry. Medical bills for her mother Sarah and a looming mortgage payment weighed on her like a storm cloud. The offer from James Carter, a man she barely knew, felt like a lifeline wrapped in unease. $10,000 could clear her debts, give her mother breathing room, and let Lila dream of a future beyond survival. But pretending to be some rich man's holiday guest, it felt transactional, almost absurd. She pictured James tall, pale, with a reserved demeanor that hid something more profound, and wondered why he'd chosen her. Was it pity? A whim? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, doubt gnawing at her. Finally she typed, "I'm in. Let's talk details." As she hit send, a chill ran through her, as if she'd entered a story she didn't fully understand. A sleek black car pulled outside the diner as Lila finished her shift the following evening. The driver, a stern man in a suit, introduced himself as Thomas James's 35-year-old black assistant. His sharp gaze sized her up, skepticism etched into his features as if he suspected her of ulterior motives. Lila clutched her worn purse, her dark curls bouncing as she slid into the back seat, feeling like an outsider in a world of wealth. The city blurred past Christmas lights, twinkling on storefronts, carols drifting from open windows. But inside the car, silence reigned. Lila's stomach churned. Was this a mistake? She glanced at her phone, tempted to text her best friend for advice, then stopped. This was her choice, her risk. She leaned back, whispering, "You got this, Lila, just one night." Back at the penthouse, James paced the marble floor, his white skin flushed with nerves. The minimalist decor, glass tables, leather couches, a single string of fairy lights, did little to warm the space. Evelyn, his 50-year-old Puerto Rican housekeeper, bustled in with a tray of hot cider, her warm smile starkly contrasting the sterile surroundings. "You're doing something bold, Mr. Carter," she said, her accent soft. Maybe this girl will bring some life to this place. James managed a tight smile, unsure if he was ready for life to disrupt his carefully controlled world. As the doorbell chimed, signaling Lila's arrival, his heart raced. He straightened his sweater, took a deep breath, and opened the door to a future neither could predict. Hey, what did you think of James and Lila's bold move? Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. Let's see how this Christmas tale unfolds. If you're hooked, give this a like and hit that subscribe button for the next part. Trust me, the drama's just beginning. The elevator hummed as it ascended to James Carter's penthouse, the glass walls reflecting Lila Harris's tense expression. She adjusted her scarf, her fingers brushing the frayed edges of her purse, starkly contrasting the polished chrome around her. The doors slid open, revealing a sprawling apartment that seemed to float above Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Central Park dusted with snow, but the interior felt sterile, white leather furniture, a glass coffee table, and a lone string of fairy lights casting faint shadows. Lila stepped forward, her sneakers squeaking on the marble floor, feeling like an intruder in a world of wealth. James stood at the far end of the living room, his hands buried in the pockets of his navy sweater. His blue eyes flickered with uncertainty as he offered a hesitant smile. "Welcome, Lila," he said, his voice low, almost drowned by the hum of the city below. She nodded, clutching her purse tighter, unsure whether to treat him as a boss or a host. The air between them crackled with awkwardness, neither knowing how to bridge the gap of their arrangement. Lila scanned the room, noting the absence of personal touches. No family photos, no worn books, just a curated perfection that felt hollow. Evelyn, the housekeeper, emerged from the kitchen, her warm smile a beacon in the cold space. "She said you must be chilled from the ride," setting a tray of steaming cider on the glass table. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her eyes crinkled with kindness. "This'll warm you up." Lila thanked her, the cider's sweet aroma grounding her. Evelyn felt like a lifeline, a reminder of the diner's warmth. James watched the exchange, a flicker of gratitude crossing his face, as if Evelyn's kindness softened the edges of his unease. Thomas, the assistant, lingered near the doorway, his sharp gaze fixed on Lila. His tailored suit and crossed arms screamed skepticism, as if he expected her to pocket the silverware. "Everything in order, Mr. Carter?" he asked, his tone clipped. James nodded, but Thomas's eyes didn't leave Lila, his distrust palpable. She met his stare, refusing to shrink, though her stomach twisted. Was she just a prop in James's charade, or was there more to his offer? The weight of the $10,000 promise pressed on her, mingling with doubt. James cleared his throat, gesturing toward a sleek couch. "Please sit. We should go over the plan." Lila perched on the edge, the leather cool against her jeans. He explained the ruse she'd pose as a close friend for his family's Christmas Eve video call, convincing them he wasn't the isolated mogul they pitied. "My Aunt Margaret. She's particular," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "She controls the family trust and she's always watching." Lila nodded, catching the strain in his voice. His vulnerability surprised her, a crack in the polished facade of a man who seemed to have everything. As they spoke, Lila's eyes wandered to a small Christmas tree in the corner, its silver ornaments glinting under recessed lights. It was beautiful, but lifeless, like a display in a store window. She thought of her mother's apartment in Harlem, cluttered with handmade decorations and memories of laughter despite their struggles. The contrast stung, reminding her how far she was from home. James noticed her gaze and hesitated, as if reading her thoughts. "It's not much of a holiday setup," he admitted, a faint flush creeping up his cheeks. "I don't usually celebrate." Lila's lips twitched into a small smile. "It's fancy," at least she said, her voice soft but teasing. For a moment, Their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of understanding. Two strangers navigating an absurd agreement. The moment broke when Thomas stepped forward, adjusting his cufflinks. He said dinner was ready in the dining room, his tone neutral, but his eyes still wary. Evelyn shot Lila an encouraging nod as they rose, her warmth, a quiet promise that not everyone here saw her as an outsider. Lila's fingers accidentally brushed James's arm as they moved toward the dining room, sending a jolt through her. He glanced at her, surprised, and she quickly looked away, her heart racing. The table was set with crystal glasses and a single poinsettia centerpiece, but the grandeur only deepened her sense of displacement. Outside, the city sparkled, unaware of the tension within these walls. Lila took a deep breath, steeling herself for the night ahead, wondering if the money was worth stepping into James's world and what secrets it held. The dining room glowed under the soft light of a crystal chandelier, its prisms scattering flecks of light across the mahogany table. Lila sat across from James, the poinsettia centerpiece, a vibrant splash of red between them. The meal, roasted duck, rosemary potatoes, and glazed carrots, was exquisite, but Lila's fork hovered over her plate, her appetite dulled by the weight of the evening. James, too, seemed distracted, his blue eyes darting to the windows where the Manhattan skyline glittered against the night. Evelyn crept, refilling their water glasses, her warm presence contrasting the room's formality. Thomas stood near the door, his posture rigid, as if guarding against an unseen threat. Lila tried to focus on James's earlier explanation of the Christmas Eve video call, but her mind wandered to the $10,000 offer. It was a lifeline for her mother's medical bills, yet the sterility of the penthouse made her feel like a hired prop. She glanced at James, catching a flicker of unease in his expression. "So, your family?" she said, breaking the silence. "They're really that tough on you?" James set down his fork, his lips tightening. "Margaret, my aunt expects perfection. If I don't look stable, she'll question my role in the family trust." His voice carried a bitterness that surprised Lila, hinting at deeper wounds. Before she could respond, a faint tap echoed from the direction of James's office, sharp and deliberate like a pebble against glass. Lila froze, her pulse quickening. James's head snapped toward the sound, his jaw clenching. "Probably just the wind," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Thomas stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'll check it," he said, his voice low, already moving toward the hallway. Lila's instincts, honed from late nights at the diner, screamed that something was wrong. She pushed back her chair, ignoring James's protest. "I'm coming too," she said, her voice steady, despite the knot in her stomach. The office was a sleek contrast to the dining room, with dark wood shelves lined with tech awards and a massive desk facing a floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights cast long shadows, and the air felt colder here, as if the room held secrets. Thomas scanned the perimeter, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Lila stayed close, her breath shallow as James hovered behind his hands, stuffed in his pockets. The tapping had stopped, but the silence felt heavier, oppressive. Thomas crouched near the window, his fingers tracing faint scratches on the frame. "Footprints," he muttered, pointing to smudged marks in the snow on the balcony. Someone was out there. Lila's heart raced. The balcony was 40 floors up. Access required insider knowledge or serious intent. "Who'd climb up here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas's gaze flicked to her, still tinged with suspicion, but he didn't answer. James ran a hand through his blonde hair, his face pale. "It could be paparazzi. They've been hounding me since the last merger." But his eyes betrayed doubt, and Lila sensed he was grasping for a simple explanation. She stepped closer to the window, her reflection merging with the city's glow, and shivered. Someone was watching them. Evelyn appeared at the door, her bun slightly askew, clutching a dish towel. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice tight. James nodded, but his forced smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just a false alarm," he said, though no one believed it. Lila caught his glance, a fleeting moment of shared uncertainty that felt oddly intimate. She wanted to ask more about his Fears family, this sterile life, but Thomas's curt voice cut through. "I'm setting up cameras tomorrow. No one's getting in again." His tone was final, but Lila noticed his hand lingering near his phone, as if ready to call for backup. They returned to the dining room, but the mood had shifted. The ducks sat cold on their plates, and the light of the chandelier felt harsh. Lila sipped her water, her mind racing. Was this job worth the unease? She thought of her mother Sarah waiting in Harlem, counting on her. James leaned forward, his voice soft. "If you're not comfortable, Lila, you can leave. I don't want you feeling trapped." His sincerity caught her off guard, and for a moment she saw past the wealth to a man wrestling with his doubts. She shook her head. "I'm here now. Let's see it through." A small smile tugged at his lips, and their eyes held a quiet pact, forming in the flickering light. As Evelyn cleared the plates, Lila's thoughts lingered on the footprints. Someone had targeted James, and she was caught in the crosshairs. The penthouse, once a symbol of untouchable wealth, now felt like a stage for something darker. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the whispers of danger creeping closer. The penthouse was shrouded in silence, the city's distant hum muffled by thick glass windows. Lila lay in the guest room, the plush bed doing little to ease her restlessness. The faint tapping from earlier echoed in her mind, a nagging reminder that something was amiss. She glanced at her phone, 2:17 a.m., and sighed, unable to shake the unease that clung to her like frost. Downstairs, James sat in his office, the desk lamp casting harsh shadows across his face. He stared at the balcony door, the scratches Thomas had found glinting in the dim light. The footprints in the snow haunted him, a sign that his carefully curated world was under siege. A sharp rustle broke the quiet like paper sliding across wood. Lila sat up, heart pounding, and crept to her door, peering into the darkened hallway. The sound came from below, near the front entrance. She slipped on her sneakers, her steps light on the polished floor, and descended the spiral staircase, her hand grazing the cold metal railing. In the foyer, a white envelope lay on the marble floor, its edges creased as if hastily shoved under the door. Her breath caught. She knew better than to touch it alone. She hurried to James's office, finding him hunched over his desk, a glass of untouched whiskey beside him. "James," she whispered, her voice sharp enough to snap him upright. "There's an envelope by the door." He stood, his blue eyes wide, and followed her without a word. Thomas appeared from the shadows, his presence as sudden as a guard dog's. "I heard it too," he said, his voice low, already moving toward the foyer. Evelyn trailed behind, clutching a flashlight, her face etched with worry. Together they gathered around the envelope, its stark whiteness stark against the dark floor. James knelt, his fingers hesitating before picking it up. "No return address," he muttered, slicing it open with a letter opener. Inside were grainy photos, Lila stepping out of the chauffeured car, her purse clutched tightly. James greeting her at the penthouse door. And most chilling, an old black and white image of James's father, Robert Carter, shaking hands with a man in a suit, standing outside a Harlem office building. Scrawled notes accompanied the photos, detailing their fake arrangement with a typed letter demanding $500,000 by Christmas Eve. "Pay, or the media gets this. Your empire falls, and the waitress's life with it," it read. Lila's stomach twisted as she read her name. Her presence in the scheme was no accident. A final note hinted at a more profound connection. "Ask about Harlem, 1985. James's face paled, his hands trembling as he studied the old photo. "That's my father," he said, his voice barely audible. "I don't know the other man, but..." Harlem. Lila's mind raced to her mother's stories. Sarah Harris, working grueling hours as a cleaner for a wealthy businessman who'd promised stability but left her with nothing. "My mom worked for someone like your dad," she said, her voice tight. "He exploited her, leaving us scraping by." Could this be him? The question hung heavy, their eyes locking in shared dread. The blackmailer knew their histories, weaving them into a trap. Thomas scanned the letter, his jaw tight. "This isn't random. Someone's been watching you both." He pulled out his phone and checked security feeds, but the cameras showed nothing. No figure, no car, just snow falling outside. Evelyn clutched her flashlight tighter, her voice shaking. Who'd do this? Why drag Lila into it? James ran a hand through his blonde hair, frustration etching his features. My father had enemies. His deals weren't always clean. But this, it's personal. Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just a pawn, she needed answers. They moved to the living room, the fairy lights casting a mocking festive glow. James spread the photos on the coffee table, the old image of his father drawing their focus. Lila traced the Harlem building's outline, her memory sparking. Mom mentioned a real estate deal that went sour. Her boss lost everything, and she was collateral damage. James's eyes met hers, guilt flickering. If my father was involved, I didn't know. But we'll find out. His promise felt genuine, a crack in his guarded demeanor that stirred something in Lila. Thomas broke the moment, his voice sharp. We need to secure the penthouse. Whoever left this could come back. He moved to check the locks, and his efficiency reminded him of his security background. Evelyn offered to make coffee, her hands trembling as she retreated to the kitchen. Lila and James remained, and the photos were a silent accusation between them. Why me? Lila asked, her voice soft but piercing. James hesitated, then reached for her hand, his touch tentative. I don't know yet, but I won't let them use you. We're in this together. His words, though uncertain, carried weight, forging a fragile alliance as the night deepened the city outside, unaware of the storm brewing within. The penthouse's living room was bathed in the dim glow of fairy lights, their soft twinkle starkly contrasting the tension gripping the air. Lila sat on the edge of the leather couch, the blackmailer's photos spread across the glass coffee table, like pieces of a shattered puzzle. The image of Robert Carter shaking hands outside a Harlem office building burned in her mind, stirring memories of her mother's stories, bitter tales of broken promises and a life upended. James stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the Manhattan skyline, his blonde hair catching the light as he stared at the snow-dusted city below. The envelope's threat, $500,000 or ruin, loomed over them. Its words, a silent taunt. We need to know who's behind this. Lila said, her voice steady despite her stomach churning. She pointed to the old photo. This man with your father, he's the key. My mom worked for someone in Harlem who ruined her. If it's connected, we're not just pawns in a game. James turned, his blue eyes meeting hers, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. He admitted that my father's business wasn't always clean, his voice low. He made enemies, but I never dug into it. I should have. His raw and unguarded honesty stirred something in Lila, a sense that he was more than the polished mogul she'd met. Thomas entered, his phone in hand, his jaw tight. Security feeds are clean, but I'm cross-referencing the building in that photo. It's a start. His efficiency was a lifeline, though. His lingering skepticism of Lila hung in the air. Evelyn hovered near the kitchen door, her hands twisting a dish towel, her eyes darting between them. I'll make more coffee, she murmured, retreating as if the act of brewing could hold the night's chaos at bay. James nodded at Lila. Let's check my father's study. If there's anything about Harlem, it'll be there. The study was a dark wood and leather fortress shelves lined with tech awards and dusty ledgers. A portrait of Robert Carter hung above the desk, his stern gaze seeming to judge the room. James knelt by a sleek safe tucked beneath a bookshelf, his fingers trembling as he entered the code. The door clicked open, revealing a stack of yellow documents and a leather-bound ledger. Lila's breath caught as James handed it to her, their fingers brushing a fleeting warmth in the cold room. They sat on the floor, the ledger open between them, its pages brittle with age. The entries detailed a real estate deal from 1985, where Robert Carter bankrolled a Harlem development project, partnering with Marcus Reed, a local entrepreneur. The project collapsed, leaving Reed bankrupt and his employees, including Lila's mother, Sarah Harris, jobless. Handwritten notes in Robert's scrawl hinted at regret. Reed trusted me. I pushed too hard. Must make amends. Lila's voice shook as she read aloud. My mom cleaned offices for Reed. When his business failed, she lost everything, her savings, her stability. She said the man behind it was untouchable. Her eyes met James's anger and pain swirling within her. James's face crumpled, his hands clenching the ledger. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking. My father kept this hidden. If he hurt your family, Lila, I'm sorry. His sincerity pierced her defenses, and she felt a tug of connection, as if their shared past was binding them. She touched his arm, her fingers lingering. It's not your fault, but we need to know why someone's dragging this up now. The blackmailer's choice of Lila wasn't random. It was a calculated strike exploiting old wounds to hurt James. Thomas appeared at the door, holding his phone. The building in the photo is tied to Reed's old company. I found a digital trail. Someone's been searching your name, James and Lila's, for weeks. They knew you'd hire her. His words landed like a blow, confirming the blackmailer's premeditation. Lila's mind raced. How had they known about her? James stood, determination hardening his features. We find Reed. We find the blackmailer. There's more in this safe, letters, maybe contracts. He pulled out a bundle of papers, his hands steady now, driven by purpose. As they sifted through documents, Lila found a faded memo mentioning Reed's son, Daniel, who'd inherited his father's grudge. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was incomplete. Evelyn entered, setting down coffee mugs, her eyes soft with concern. You're stirring up ghosts, she warned, her voice barely above a whisper. Lila nodded, her resolve firm. She wasn't just here for the money anymore. She needed the truth. James glanced at her, his expression a mix of guilt and admiration. We'll figure this out together, he said, his voice a quiet vow. In that moment, the ledger wasn't just evidence. It was a bridge between their pasts, pulling them closer as the night whispered of dangers yet to come. The penthouse study felt like a vault, its dark wood shelves and heavy air sealing in the secrets of Robert Carter's ledger. Lila and James sat on the floor, the open safe spilling papers between them, the faint scent of old ink mingling with the coffee Evelyn had left. The ledger's entries about Marcus Reed's bankruptcy and Sarah Harris's exploitation burned in Lila's mind, each word a wound tying her family to James's. Outside, snow fell silently, coating Manhattan in a deceptive calm, but inside, the weight of the blackmailer's threat, $500,000, or ruin, pressed harder. Thomas stood by the door, his phone glowing as he traced digital leads, his jaw set with focus. Lila flipped a page, her fingers trembling as she read another of Robert's regretful notes. He knew he hurt people, she said, her voice tight, but he never fixed it. James nodded, his blue eyes shadowed with guilt. I should have looked into this sooner. My father's legacy isn't what I thought. A soft creak at the door broke their shared silence. Evelyn stood there. Her bun loosened her hands, twisting the dish towel she always carried. Her eyes, usually warm, were clouded with something more profound, fear perhaps, or pain. "Evelyn, you okay?" Lila asked, setting the ledger down. Evelyn hesitated, glancing at James, then back at Lila. "She said you heard you talking about Marcus Reed?" Her voice low, almost a whisper. I knew him." The words landed like a stone, shifting the room's gravity. James straightened his blonde hair, catching the lamplight. "Knew him," how he asked, his tone gentle but urgent. Evelyn stepped inside, shutting the door behind her, as if to guard their words from the silent penthouse. She sank into a leather chair, her fingers smoothing the towel. "My brother Miguel worked for Marcus in the 80s, driving trucks for his real estate projects in Harlem. Marcus was good to us. He gave Miguel steady work and treated him like family. When your father's deal went bad," she said, looking at James, "Marcus lost everything. Miguel was out of a job, had no savings and no way to pay for his kid's school. It broke him." Her voice cracked, and Lila's heart ached, recognizing the same pain her mother carried. James leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I didn't know, Evelyn." "Why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "You were a boy when I started working here. Your father was distant, but you were kind. I stayed because of you, not him. But Marcus, he blamed Robert for everything. He'd call sometimes ranting about betrayal. I never thought it'd come to this." Her eyes darted to the ledger, then to Lila. "When I saw you, Lila, I wondered if you were tied to that past. Now I know." Lila's breath caught. "My mom worked for Marcus too. If he's behind this, why drag me into it?" Evelyn shook her head, her bun slipping further. "Not Marcus. He passed years ago. But his son Daniel was young when it happened, and he was angry. I heard he swore to make the Carters pay." Thomas looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing. "That fits. The digital trail I found, someone's been digging into both your lives. James, Lila. Daniel Reed's name keeps popping up in old forums, ranting about your family." The confirmation tightened the knot in Lila's stomach. James stood pacing to the window, his reflection sharp against the snowy cityscape. "So Daniel's using our past to tear us down. He knew I'd hire Lila, didn't he?" Thomas nodded. "He's been tracking your moves. Probably saw you at the diner, Lila, and dug into your history. It's not random." Lila's fists clenched, anger flaring. She wasn't just a prop in James's charade. She was a target chosen to reopen old wounds. The thought of her mother's struggles being weaponized made her blood boil. Evelyn rose, placing a hand on Lila's shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "You're not alone in this, mija. I've seen what secrets do to families. We'll face this together." Her words, soft but firm, forged a bond, making Lila feel less like an outsider. James stopped pacing, his gaze settling on Lila. "I dragged you into this mess," he said, his voice raw. "But I won't let you get hurt. We'll find Daniel, stop him." His eyes held hers, a promise that felt more personal than professional, stirring a warmth in her chest. Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'm not here just for the money anymore. I need the truth for my mom, for me." Their hands brushed as she handed him the ledger, a fleeting contact that sent a spark through her. Thomas pocketed his phone, his skepticism softening. "I'll keep digging. We need more on Daniel, where he is, and what he wants." Evelyn straightened her eyes fierce. "I'll help however I can. For Miguel, for all of us." The room hummed with purpose, the ledger a beacon in the gathering storm, as the penthouse braced for the truths waiting to surface. The penthouse's living room was a fortress of tension, the fairy lights casting a soft glow that did little to warm the chilled atmosphere. Lila stood by the coffee table, the blackmailer's photos and Robert Carter's ledger spread like a map of buried sins. The revelation of Daniel Reed's vendetta, fueled by his father's ruin in Harlem, hung heavy, tying her mother's past to James's family. James paced near the window. His blonde hair disheveled, his blue eyes scanning the snowy Manhattan skyline, as if answers lay in the city's glitter. Evelyn sat quietly, her dish towel folded neatly in her lap, her earlier confession about her brother Miguel still lingering. Thomas stood apart, leaning against the wall, his sharp gaze fixed on Lila. His tailored suit was crisp, but his clenched jaw betrayed unease. The digital trail he'd uncovered, Daniel Reed's searches into James and Lila's lives, confirmed a calculated plot, yet his suspicion of Lila hadn't entirely faded. As James flipped through the ledger, muttering about his father's regrets, Thomas stepped forward, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Lila, how do we know you're not part of this?" His words were sharp, like a blade, testing her resolve. Lila's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me," James stopped pacing, his expression hardening. "Thomas, that's enough. She's as much a target as I am." But Lila raised a hand, her voice steady despite the sting. "No, let him talk. If he's got something to say, I want to hear it." Her defiance filled the room, and Evelyn's eyes widened, a mix of worry and admiration. Thomas crossed his arms, his posture rigid. "You show up a stranger from the diner right when this blackmail starts. Daniel knew James would hire you. How do we know you're not working with him?" Lila's fists clenched, her heart pounding. "You think I'd put myself through this for a setup? I'm here for my mom to pay her bills, not to play some game." Her voice trembled with anger, but she held his gaze. Thomas's eyes flickered, his skepticism wavering. He exhaled, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. He said, "I've been burned before," his tone softer, but guarded. "Years ago, I was a security guard for a tech firm. Got blamed for a leak I didn't cause. Lost my job, my reputation. I don't trust easily, especially when things line up too neatly." The admission hung in the air, raw and unexpected. James's brows furrowed, his voice gentle. "You never told me that, Thomas." The assistant shrugged, his eyes dropping to the floor. "Didn't see the point. But protecting you, James, that's my shot at proving I'm more than a scapegoat." Lila's anger softened, replaced by a grudging respect. She saw his weight, the same survival instinct she knew too well. "I get it," she said, her voice quieter. "But I'm not your enemy. Daniel's using my mom's pain to hurt us both. I want him stopped as much as you do." Thomas nodded slowly, his posture easing. "Fair enough. Let's prove it." He pulled out his phone, opening a file. I dug deeper into Daniel Reed. Found an old email account tied to him. He's been contacting tabloids, feeding them rumors about you, James. And he's got a burner phone pinging near Harlem. He's close. The news tightened the room's tension, a reminder that the blackmailer was circling. James's jaw clenched. "He's planning something big for Christmas Eve. We need more evidence." Lila picked up the ledger, her fingers tracing Robert's scrawled notes. "There's got to be something here. Something that shows why Daniel's so obsessed." She flipped to a page detailing a loan Robert never repaid to Marcus Reed, a betrayal that sealed his bankruptcy. A handwritten note mentioned that Daniel, a boy at the time, was left destitute. "Lila said he blames your family for his whole life," her voice heavy. James nodded, his eyes meeting hers, a shared understanding passing between them. "Then we hit back with the truth," he said, his voice firm. Evelyn rose, her hands steady now. "My brother knew Daniel back then. He was angry even as a kid. If he's behind this, he won't stop." Her words carried a quiet resolve, binding them further. Thomas pocketed his phone, his skepticism replaced by purpose. "I'll trace that burner phone. If we can pinpoint Daniel, we can catch him before he strikes." Lila felt a surge of determination, her hand brushing James's as she handed him the ledger. The contact sparked her, grounding her in their shared fight. She said, "We're not just fighting for us," her eyes fierce. "This is for my mom, Miguel, and everyone Daniel's trying to hurt." Once a cold cage, the penthouse now felt like a battleground their alliance forged in the face of a looming threat. The penthouse's living room glowed faintly under the fairy lights, their delicate twinkle mocking the tension that gripped the space. Lila sat on the leather couch, Robert Carter's ledger on the coffee table, its pages a testament to past betrayals. The blackmailer's threat, $500,000, or public ruin, loomed like a storm cloud, with Daniel Reed's vendetta tying her mother's pain to James's family. James stood by the fireplace, its crackling flames casting shadows across his face, his blonde hair catching the warm light. Thomas was at the dining table, his phone glowing as he traced Daniel's burner phone signals, his fingers tapping with restless precision. Evelyn hovered near the kitchen, arranging a tray of pastries. Her movements were a quiet attempt to anchor the group. Lila's eyes lingered on the ledger's notes about Marcus Reed's bankruptcy, her mother's name scrawled among the casualties. The weight of her family's struggles pressed on her, but James's guilt-ridden promise to uncover the truth gave her hope. Their silence was broken by James's phone buzzing on the table, its screen flashing with a message from his Aunt Margaret. "Video call tomorrow, Christmas Eve, 8 p.m. Bring your guest. No excuses." James's jaw tightened, his blue eyes darkening. "She's relentless," he muttered, tossing the phone down. Lila glanced at him, curious. "Your aunt? Why's she so hard on you?" James sighed, sinking onto the couch beside her, the leather creaking under his weight. "Margaret controls the family trust millions tied to our tech empire. She thinks I'm too soft, not cutthroat like my father. If I don't look stable, happy, she'll push to cut me out." His voice carried a raw edge, revealing a man trapped by expectations. Lila's heart softened. She knew how to take a family's weight. "So that's why you hired me," she said, her tone gentle but probing. "To look like you've got it all together?" James nodded, his gaze dropping to his hands. "It's pathetic, I know, but Margaret's got the board in her pocket. One wrong move and I lose everything I've built." His vulnerability disarmed her, peeling back the mogul to reveal a man wrestling with his father's shadow. Lila leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his. "It's not pathetic. It's human. My mom's counting on me too. We're not so different." Her words hung between them, a quiet bridge over the chasm of their worlds. Thomas looked up from his phone, his skepticism softened, but still present. "We've got bigger problems than family drama." Daniel's burner phone pinged near Times Square an hour ago. "He's moving." Evelyn set the pastry tray down, her hands steady despite her worried eyes. "If he's close, he'll act soon." That video call could be his chance to strike. Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we use it. Show your family we're not hiding, but need a plan to catch Daniel." James stood, his expression shifting to determination. "We'll play along with the call and act like everything's fine. But we'll dig deeper into the ledger, find something to expose Daniel's lies." He turned to Lila, his eyes searching hers. "Will you stay for this? Beyond the money, I mean." His question was raw, a plea for partnership. Lila's breath caught, the $10,000 fading against the pull of their shared fight. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm. "For my mom. For the truth." Their eyes locked. A spark of trust ignited, and momentarily the tension eased. Evelyn spoke, her voice soft but resolute. "I'll help set up the call, make it look festive. Keep Margaret off your back." Thomas pocketed his phone, his tone businesslike. "I'll discreetly get my police contact on standby. If Daniel tries anything, we'll be ready." The group's unity felt fragile but real, forged in the face of a common enemy. Lila picked up the ledger, her fingers tracing Robert's scrawled regrets. "There's more here," she said. "A letter, Maybe something Daniel doesn't want us to find. James nodded his hand, brushing hers as he took the ledger, the contact sending a quiet thrill through her. As they planned, the fireplace's glow warmed the room, contrasting with the snowy city outside. James's phone buzzed again, another message from Margaret. "Don't disappoint us, James." He silenced it, his jaw set, seeing a man caught between duty and defiance. Lila watched him and felt a pull to stand by him. The Christmas Eve call loomed, a stage for their facade and a trap for Daniel. The penthouse, once a cold shell, now pulsed with purpose as the group braced for the storm that would break under the holiday lights. The penthouse attic was a maze of shadows, its slanted ceiling and dusty crates bathed in the pale glow of a single skylight. Lila and James climbed the narrow staircase, the creak of each step echoing like a warning. The air smelled of old wood and forgotten paper, contrasting with the sleek modernity below. Robert Carter's ledger, clutched in James's hands, had revealed Marcus Reed's ruin and Sarah Harris's suffering. But Lila sensed more answers lay hidden here. The blackmailer's threat, $500,000, or public ruin, loomed closer with Christmas Eve's video call just hours away. Thomas was downstairs, coordinating with his police contact, while Evelyn prepared the living room for a festive facade to appease Margaret's scrutiny. James set the ledger on a crate, his blonde hair dusted with cobwebs as he pried open a metal filing cabinet. "My father kept everything: contracts, letters. If there's proof of what he owed your family, it's here," he said, his voice taut with purpose. Lila nodded her fingers, brushing the edge of a dusty trunk, her heart heavy with the weight of her mother's past. The ledger's notes had confirmed Sarah's exploitation, but the why of Daniel Reed's vendetta remained murky. She knelt beside a stack of boxes, sifting through faded documents, her breath catching at each mention of Harlem. A yellowed envelope slipped from a folder addressed to Sarah Harris in Robert's sharp handwriting. Lila's pulse quickened as she handed it to James, their fingers brushing a quiet spark in the dim attic. He opened it carefully, revealing a letter dated 1986. "Dear Sarah," it began. "I deeply regret the harm caused by Marcus Reed's collapse. Your dedication deserved better. I intend to compensate you and others affected to right my wrongs." A long-expired check was tucked inside, made out to Sarah for $20,000. Lila's eyes stung, her mother's years of struggle flashing before her. He knew, she whispered. He wanted to fix it, but never did. James's face tightened, guilt etched in his features. "I had no idea," he said, his voice breaking. "This is why Daniel targeted you. Your mother's pain. It's his ammunition." Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. The letter wasn't just evidence. It was a piece of her family's history, a promise unfulfilled. She tucked it into her pocket, feeling closer to her mother than ever. James reached for her hand, his touch steady. "We'll make this right, Lila. For Sarah, for everyone." His raw and sincere words deepened their bond, a partnership forged in shared truth. The moment was shattered as a shadow moved at the attic's far end, heavy footsteps crunching on the wooden floor. Lila's breath caught, and James tensed his hand, tightening on hers. A figure emerged, tall, cloaked in a dark hoodie, a knife glinting in his grip. Daniel James growled, recognizing the man from a grainy photo in the ledger. Daniel Reed's eyes, cold and unyielding, locked on them. "You're digging where you shouldn't," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Hand over the ledger, or this gets ugly." Lila's heart raced, but she stepped forward, clutching the letter in her pocket. "You're using my mom's pain to hurt us," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "Why? What did we ever do to you?" Daniel's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Your family suffered because of him," he said, pointing the knife at James. "My father lost everything: his business, his dignity. Your collateral, Lila, to show the world the Carters' filth. James moved in front of her, his stance protective. "This ends now, Daniel. You won't ruin us." The attic erupted in chaos as Daniel lunged, the knife flashing. Lila grabbed a heavy candlestick from a crate, swinging it with all her strength, catching Daniel's arm. He grunted, stumbling, the knife clattering to the floor. James tackled him, pinning him against a stack of boxes, papers scattering like snow. Daniel twisted free, his hoodie tearing as he bolted for the stairs, his footsteps fading into the penthouse's depths. Lila's chest heaved, the candlestick still in her hands, as James steadied himself, a bruise forming on his cheek. Among the scattered papers, a keychain glinted, engraved with DR. Lila picked it up, her fingers trembling. "It's his," she said, her voice fierce. Proof he was here. James nodded, his eyes meeting hers, a mix of relief and admiration. "You were incredible," he said, his voice soft. Lila managed a shaky smile. The letter in her pocket reminded her why she fought. Downstairs, Thomas's shout signaled he'd seen Daniel flee. Once a repository of secrets, the attic was now a battleground, its truths arming them for the fight ahead as Christmas Eve loomed. The penthouse buzzed tensely as Christmas Eve descended, and the city was aglow with holiday lights. Lila stood in the living room, adjusting a string of fairy lights on a sleek Christmas tree, its silver ornaments glinting like ice. The unsent letter to her mother, Sarah, tucked in her pocket, felt like a talisman, its promise of amends fueling her resolve. James paced near the fireplace, his blonde hair mussed, his blue eyes darting to his phone, where Margaret's demand for the 8 p.m. video call loomed. The blackmailer's threat, $500, $1,000, or ruin, hung over them, with Daniel Reed's keychain and the ledger as their only weapons. Thomas was in the corner, wiring hidden cameras to the garden, his movements precise. Evelyn arranged a festive tray of cookies, her hands steady despite the worry in her eyes. James said, "We'll play the perfect hosts for Margaret," his voice tight but determined. "But we're setting a trap for Daniel. He's expecting money tonight." Lila nodded, her fingers brushing the letter. "He chose me to hurt you, but we'll turn it on him." Thomas looked up, his skepticism gone, replaced by a steely focus. "Cameras are set. My police contacts on standby, parked 2 blocks away. We draw Daniel out and get his confession on tape." Evelyn set the tray down, her voice soft. "Be careful. Daniel's desperate. Desperate men do desperate things." The plan was risky but straightforward. Stage a flawless video call to appease Margaret while luring Daniel to the garden with a fake payment. James had texted Daniel's burner phone offering $500, $1,000 under the outdoor Christmas tree at midnight. The ledger and letter would stay hidden there, ace, to expose his lies. Lila adjusted her sweater, her heart pounding. She wasn't just a waitress playing a role, she was fighting for her mother's truth. James caught her eye, his gaze softening. "You don't have to do this," he said, stepping closer. "It's dangerous." Lila shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm not backing out now. We're in this together." His hand grazed hers, a quiet promise sealing their bond. As 8 p.m. approached, the living room transformed into a festive facade. Evelyn lit candles, their warm glow softening the sterile space, while Thomas tested the video feed. The call connected, Margaret's stern face filling the screen, her silver hair pulled tight. "James, introduce your guest," she said, her tone sharp. Lila stepped forward, her smile practiced but genuine. "I'm Lila, a friend. Happy to share Christmas with James." Margaret's eyes narrowed, but James's arm brushed Lila's, a subtle reassurance. The call ended with Margaret's grudging approval buying them time. But the real test was hours away. At midnight, the garden was a frozen stage, the outdoor Christmas tree casting colorful lights across the snow. Lila and James, stepped outside, their boots crunching breath, clouding in the frigid air. James held a thick envelope stuffed with fake bills, his jaw set. Lila scanned the shadows, her pulse racing. Thomas hid behind a stone bench, camera ready, while Evelyn watched from the kitchen window, her hands clasped. A figure emerged from the darkness. Daniel, his hoodie pulled low, eyes glinting with malice. He held a gun, its barrel catching the tree's lights. "The money," he growled, stepping closer. James raised the envelope, his voice steady. "First guarantee you'll destroy the photos, the lies." Daniel laughed, bitter and cold. "You're in no position to bargain. Your father ruined mine, Harlem, 1985. Lila's mom was just collateral, a way to twist the knife." Lila's blood boiled, her voice cutting through. "You used my family's pain for your revenge." "Why me?" Daniel's smile was cruel. "I saw James at your diner digging into your life. You were perfect, a symbol of everything his family broke." His words stung, but Lila stood tall, refusing to be a pawn. As Daniel reached for the envelope, Lila stumbled, deliberately drawing his attention. Thomas's camera whirred, capturing Daniel's face as he lowered his hood. James pressed forward. "Take the money and disappear." Daniel tore open the envelope, snarling at the fake bills. "A trick," he roared, raising the gun. A shot rang out, shattering a glass panel, shards glittering in the snow. Lila dove behind the tree, heart pounding as Thomas tackled Daniel, the camera rolling. Police sirens wailed, and officers swarmed the garden, pinning Daniel, as he cursed, his gun clattering to the ground. James pulled Lila to her feet, his hand tight on hers, relief flooding his eyes. The trap had worked, but the night's chaos left them shaken. The tree's lights a mocking backdrop to their victory. The penthouse living room was a battlefield of aftermath, its fairy lights casting a soft glow over the chaos of Christmas Eve. Shards of glass from the shattered garden panel glittered on the floor, and the Christmas tree's silver ornaments swayed faintly, as if trembling from the night's violence. Lila stood by the fireplace, her hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her. The unsent letter to her mother, Sarah, rested in her pocket, a beacon of truth, amid Daniel Reed's defeated blackmail. James paced near the coffee table, his blonde hair disheveled, his blue eyes fierce with resolve. Thomas sat at the dining table, reviewing the camera footage of Daniel's confession, his fingers tapping rapidly. Evelyn swept up glass, her movements methodical, her eyes darting to the group with quiet pride. The video call with James's family was moments away, its 8 p.m. slot rescheduled after the garden confrontation. Margaret's demand to see James's guest now carried higher stakes, exposing Daniel's scheme could clear their names or ignite a media firestorm. Lila clutched the ledger, its pages heavy with Robert Carter's regrets and the letter to Sarah. "We show them everything," she said, her voice firm. "Daniel's lies, your father's promises. No more hiding." James nodded, his jaw set. "We end this tonight for you, Sarah, and everyone he hurt." His raw and resolute words deepened the bond they'd forged through danger. Thomas looked up, his voice steady. "The footage is solid. Daniel's face, his gun, his confession about Harlem. My police contact has him in custody, but this video will seal it." Evelyn set down her broom, her hands clasped. "You're doing right by Miguel and Sarah. That's what matters." Her support grounded Lila, who felt the weight of her mother's past lifting. The laptop chimed, signaling the call. James adjusted his sweater, his bruise from the attic fight barely visible, and opened the video feed. Margaret's stern face appeared, flanked by uncles and cousins, their elegant living rooms starkly contrasting to the penthouse's disarray. "James, what's this delay?" Margaret snapped, her silver hair glinting. "Introduce your guest properly." James took a deep breath, his voice steady. "This is Lila, but she's more than a guest. A blackmailer has targeted us." Daniel Reed, son of Marcus Reed, a man my father wronged in 1985. Gasps rippled through the screen, and Lila stepped forward holding the ledger. Daniel used my family's pain, my mother's Sarah Harris, to hurt James. But we found proof of Robert's regret. She raised the unsent letter, her voice unwavering. He wanted to make amends for Harlem and the families he hurt, including mine. James activated the hidden camera footage, Daniel's snarling confession playing for the stunned family. Your father ruined mine. Harlem, 1985. Lila's mom was just collateral. Margaret's face paled, her control slipping. Your father? He never told us, she murmured. James held up the ledger, his voice fierce. He tried to fix it. Letters, checks, promises. Daniel wanted revenge, not justice. He threatened to ruin us, but we're exposing him. The family watched, some ashamed, others moved, as Lila spoke. My mom suffered, but I'm here to show we're stronger than his lies. The call was live-streamed to the press, a risky move James had coordinated with Thomas. Reporters outside the penthouse gate buzzed, their cameras flashing, as the truth spread. Margaret, shaken, spoke softly. I misjudged you, James. And Lila, your strength humbles us. The trust will fund reparations for those families, starting with Sarah. Lila's eyes stung, the promise of justice for her mother overwhelming. James turned to her, his voice low. You're not just a symbol. You're the heart of this. His words, warm and sincere, sparked a quiet thrill in her. Thomas stood, his phone buzzing with updates. Police found Daniel's laptop emails to tabloids, forged documents. He's done. Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening. You've turned pain into truth. Lila pulled out the letter, her fingers tracing Sarah's name. James placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding. I'll ensure you get $50,000, Lila, for your mom's bills, your future. It's not charity. It's what's right. Her throat tightened, the financial burden lifted, and her agency was restored. The room fell silent, the fireplace's glow, a beacon of hope, as the truth reshaped their world, setting the stage for a new beginning. The penthouse living room glowed with the soft warmth of the fireplace, its flames dancing across the polished floor as Christmas morning dawned. The previous night's chaos. Daniel Reed's arrest. The shattered glass, the live-streamed truth had settled into a fragile calm. Lila sat on a plush rug, her back against the couch, the unsent letter to her mother Sarah, cradled in her hands. Its words, penned by Robert Carter, promised amends for past wrongs, a beacon of justice that eased years of pain. James sat beside her, his blonde hair catching the firelight, his blue eyes soft with relief. Thomas lounged in an armchair, his phone silent for the first time in days, while Evelyn arranged a tray of fresh bread and hot chocolate, her movements infused with quiet triumph. Outside, Manhattan sparkled under a fresh blanket of snow, the city waking to Christmas bells and distant carols. The weight of Daniel's blackmail had lifted, and his confession and arrest ensured he'd face justice. The ledger and letter, now in police hands, had cleared James and Lila's names, the press hailing their courage rather than scandal. Margaret's pledge to fund reparations for Harlem families, starting with Sarah, echoed in Lila's mind, a promise of healing. She traced the letter's faded ink, and her mother's struggles were finally acknowledged. Lila said she needed to see this, her voice steady but thick with emotion. James nodded, his hand resting near hers on the rug. We'll deliver it together, he said, his voice warm. I meant what I said. $50,000 for your mom's bills, your future. It's not just about the past. It's about what's right now. Lila's throat tightened, the financial burden that had driven her here lifting like snow melting in sunlight. She met his gaze, seeing not the mogul who'd hired her, but a man who'd fought beside her, his flaws laid bare. "Thank you," she murmured, her fingers brushing his, a spark igniting in the quiet. Evelyn set the tray down, her eyes glistening. She said this house hasn't felt like a home in years, and her smile is soft. "You've changed that, both of you." Thomas leaned forward, his usual skepticism replaced by a rare grin. Police called. Daniel's laptop had everything plans to leak lies, forged documents. "He's done, and you're heroes." His words, once guarded, carried respect, binding the group closer. Lila felt a warmth she hadn't expected, a sense of family forged in the crucible of their shared fight. James stood retrieving a small box from the Christmas tree. "I've been thinking," he said, handing it to Lila. Inside was a key engraved with the Harlem Community Center. "I'm funding it in Sarah's name," he said, his voice earnest. "A place for healing for everyone." Daniel tried to hurt. Lila's eyes welled, the gesture overwhelming. She thought of her mother, Sarah, who'd faced years of hardship with quiet strength. This center would be her legacy, a testament to resilience. "She'll love it," Lila said, her voice breaking, a tear slipping down her cheek. James knelt beside her, cupping her face, wiping the tear away. "I didn't expect you," he said softly. "This started as a deal, but you've changed everything." Lila leaned into his touch, her heart racing. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, a moment of truth that needed no words. The fireplace's glow wrapped them in warmth, the penthouse no longer a cold shell, but a haven of connection. Evelyn and Thomas exchanged a knowing glance, slipping away to give them space, the scent of hot chocolate lingering. As they pulled apart, Lila smiled, her eyes bright. "I came for the money, stayed for the truth," she said, her voice teasing but sincere. James chuckled, his hand still in hers. "I hired you to fool my family, but you showed me what matters." They sat back on the rug, sharing steaming mugs, the letter resting between them. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the city in peace. The Christmas tree's lights shimmered, reflecting their newfound hope. Lila knew that delivering the letter to Sarah would open a new chapter for her family and those wronged in Harlem. The morning stretched on, filled with quiet laughter and plans. James vowed to oversee the community center, ensuring Robert's unfulfilled promises became reality. Lila envisioned her mother's pride, a weight lifted after decades of struggle. Thomas offered to help with security, his redemption complete, while Evelyn planned a celebration for Harlem's families. The penthouse, once a stage for facades, was now a home, its walls echoing with trust and love. As bells chimed in the distance, James and Lila toasted to a future unburdened by secrets, their bond a gift brighter than any under the tree.